Hello everyone, my name is Kumar and welcome back to my channel Kumar Programming. Today we are going to create a project, library management, and it would be an end-to-end project, and this project I am going to develop in Node.js, TypeScript and Mongo DB. So now let's see at the end of this project how this project will look like and what all the things that we are going to cover in this project. So in this project we have a user authentication with the JWT token, and here we have a functionality for registration, sign in. And once users sign in, then after that we would be having a route as home route, author route, where we have the functionality for search, add author, view author, edit author and delete author. And after that we are having the book route. In the book route also we are having search functionality, add book and view, edit and delete book. Okay. And then after that we have a contact route where we are having a functionality for the contact us feature, and then user can sign out and register. Now let's see the roadmap, how we are going to proceed. So now first of all we will do the project configuration, where we will configure our project, and then after that we will configure with the MongoDB, and after that we will do our Git configuration and we will upload our project to the Git, and then after that we will do the TypeScript configuration, and then we will do the route configuration and its management, and then after that we will create the collection in our MongoDB database, and after that we will do the model creation, and further we are going to configure our view engine, EJS, embedded JavaScript, and after that we will do our layout configuration where we will create our header, footer and body, and after that we will do our style and header, and further we are going to implement our user registration, and then we will implement our user sign in, and we will do our field validation, and after that we are going to encrypt and decrypt our password, and then after that we are going to implement JWT authentication, and further we are going to implement CRUD operation for author and book, and after that we will see error handling, and then after that we are going to finish the functionality for home and contact route, and eventually we are going to build and deploy the application. Okay, so now let's start without much more time spending on it. So let's flip to the Visual Studio. Here I have created a library management project which is completely blank as of now. So first of all we are going to set up the project. In order to set up the project, let's open the terminal. In order to open the terminal, we have a shortcut as a Control J. So first of all we have to run npm init. Npm init is going to create your package.json file for your project configuration. So it's asking for the package name. Package name I have given a library management version 1.0. I'm not giving any description. Entry point is index.js. I'm just giving all the default value. Okay. So if you see here, my package.js created. So now here we are going to create a project in TypeScript. So first of all we have to install TypeScript. So in order to do that, npm install. So we have to install as a dev dependency because it is not required at the server side. So what we will do, we will just pass the parameter as a save dev. Okay, and then we will use the TypeScript. So let's get it installed. So if you see here, my dev dependency as a TypeScript has been installed, and there is a package log JSON file is created. Package log JSON file is nothing, it's just having the dependency, all the required dependency for the whatever the package that we have installed. So if suppose that your package log.json file have been deleted, so it's not a problem, but all the your package.json file needs to be there, right? Okay, and if you see here, node module folders also is being created here. Now if you want to check the version of the TypeScript, so we can check by tsc. This is TypeScript compiler -v. It will give the version of the compiler. So if you see here, currently we are using latest version 5.1.3. Now let's create the TypeScript configuration file. For that we have to type tsc init. Okay, -- init. Now it's going to create your TypeScript configuration file. So if you see here, my TypeScript configuration file is created now. So we have here a lot of options. I'm just going to use the default one, and I'm going to delete the rest of the other things. So let me just delete the entire one. Yeah. So here if you see in the compiler option, we are using the target ES16, ECMAScript 2016, and we are using the module as a common JS, and output directory that we are having a build. So let me create at root level a directory as a build, where all the build file is going to be there, all the JavaScript from TypeScript to JavaScript. Okay, and then we have module interrupt true, and we have strict true. We have force consistent casing in file name true, strict true, and skip library check true, and include we have source folder. Okay, so let me create source folder at the root level. So this source folder is having all your TypeScript file. Now let's create our first TypeScript file. I'm going to give a name as a server.ts. TypeScript file is having always extension as a .ts. Now we have to import Express. So Express is not installed yet. So we are going to install as a Express. npm install. This is required to run at the server side. So we are not going to use it as a dev dependency. Okay, and we have to install types. Okay, because now we are creating the project in types, so most of the type checking and all is being done with the its type. So we have to install as a dev dependency at the local npm install @types. Okay, and express. So now express has been installed. Now let's see our package.json file. So if you see the package.json file, dev dependency, okay, is being installed as a TypeScript. But if you see here, dependency is here dependency installed as a for express types is as a dependency, but we don't want it here. Okay, because this is just required at the client side, so we are going to move it to the dev dependency. Okay, so what we will give, save dev. Okay, so now if you see, this is going to be moved to the dev dependency. Only as of now we require express at the server side. So if you see, it's automatically moved to in the dev dependency. So always we have to be take care what all the dependencies required at the server side and what all the dependencies are required at the client side. Okay, because these dependencies are only required at the client side. Okay, so it should not be here. Now let me import this express. So we are going to use the import statement. Import, because we are using ES6 ECMAScript 6, so we can use this import express from express. Okay, now let's create the application. Const app equal to express. Okay, so here our application is being created. Now let's create the server. So here app.listen, we are going to listen port, and the port which we need, that is going to be come from the environment file. Okay, so let me create an environment file at the root directory, and environment file always having a extension as a .env. Okay, now here we will go give as a server port as a, let's give as a 4001. Okay, now in the server.ts file, how to access that environment variable, we have to use the process.env dot, and then so I've given the variable name as a server port. Okay, and then we have to pass the fat arrow function as a callback function here. Now let me console log. Here I'm going to use the template literals. Template literals are the part of ECMAScript 6. Server is, and we have to pass the variable in template literals. Like first we have to give the $sign, and then we have to give the curly bracket. Okay, process.env.server port. Okay, now one more important thing is that you can install some of the important extensions, which are, you can install easy icon themes. So if you install the easy icon themes, you can see all these icons like this, which would be easily to recognize. And then you can install the error lens also. Error lens is basically if you do some error, then it's going to give you the error detail right there. Okay, and then you can install live server. It is once we are going to execute our application, so automatically it's going to be reflect to our browser, so we don't have to refresh again and again. And then you can install the Mongo DB versus code. So if you install the Mongo DB versus code, you can see here the Mongo DB information. So your server would be here, it would be connected. I've already created a server, so it's showing the connection over there. You can install the PowerShell you can install the prettier also, and Thunder client is being used to send the request from client to server, so we can test our API. So these all are the some important extensions are there that you can install. So now let's run our server. So in order to run the TypeScript file in Node, we are required TS Node. Okay, TS Node is a TypeScript execution engine for Node.js, and it allows you to run your TypeScript code directly without pre-compiling your TypeScript code to the JavaScript, and it all does in the memory itself. So now let's install to the TS Node. So we have to be installed as a npm install TS node, and this needs to be installed at the client side. Client side, it means it's a development side. Okay, it's not after development completed, it's not required. I mean, like server side, it's not required. So here we have to just use the dev. Okay, so it's just required at the development side. So let me install it. So it's installing now. So TS node has been installed now. Now let me go to the package.json file. In package.json file, if you see here, TS node has been installed at the dev dependency. Okay. Now let me run our TypeScript file server.ts. Type here TS node. Then we have to pass the ECMAScript module ESM, and then we have to give our path for the file. Okay, TypeScript file. So here our path is src, then we have server.ts file. Okay, now let me run this. So this ESM that we can define it dynamically. So here if you see server is running on port is undefined. Okay, so why port is undefined? Let's go to our server.ts file. So if you see here we have given a process.env.server port. All this environment variable is accessible only if you have configured the .env. Okay, so now let's take the .env file, import that, import .env from .env. Okay, now we have to configure that. Okay, .env. So .env.configure. So we have not installed the .env. So let me install it in a separate terminal. npm install. Now again think .net.env is required at the development side only. Okay, because environment file is not going to be uploaded to the server, because all the environment variable are going to be picked up from the server itself. Okay, so npm install -- save dev and .env. So our .env has been installed now. So here .env.config. Okay, now we will be able to see the server port. Okay, now let me run this application once again. TS node ESM and then path. Now you can see our server is running at the port 4001. If you want to avoid this --ESM parameter while execution each and every time, we can configure it inside our tsconfig file. So here we can give as a ts node. Inside that we can give ESM equal to true. Okay, so now here we don't have to pass our ESM configuration every time. This is ECMAScript module. Okay, now what we want to do, our application should be running whenever we are doing any changes in our any file. Okay, so in order to do that, we have to install nodemon. So let's open the terminal. npm install. We have to install at the development side only. So save dev and nodemon. Okay, nodemon package is basically used to run your application automatically. Okay, so you don't have to run again and again your application whenever do your changes. So now let's see in our package.json file. If you see here, nodemon has been already installed. Now let me run our application with nodemon. So we have to just write nodemon and source folder and then server.ts. Okay, now let's run it. So if you see here, my server is running now, and if you want to do any changes and we save it, so automatically it's going to run our server once again with the nodemon. Okay, so that is the benefit we have with the nodemon. So we don't have to execute the command again and again. Now let's try to build our application. So let's open a new terminal. To build from TypeScript to JavaScript, we are using the TypeScript compiler. So if we just type tsc TypeScript compiler, it's going to convert or transpile all your TypeScript file to the JavaScript file. Now if you see here, my build folder So whatever the file we have in the src folder, everything is being transfiled into the JavaScript file. If you see here tsconfig file, we have given the output directory as a build folder, and all the files needs to be included from the source folder. Okay, so if you see here, my server.js file have been created here, and this can be executed at the server side. Okay, now let's go to the package.json file and write the script for all those actions. So here if you see, already we have a command inside the script. So now let's write the other commands here. So first command that is going to be write for the compiling from TypeScript to JavaScript. Okay, so we have to write tsc, and we are going to use the command as a tsc. Okay, simply tsc. And once it's compiled, and once we are going to compile it second time, we have to remove our whatever the file we have inside our build folder. Okay, so we have to write the command for the removal as well. So now let's write the command for the remove. So let me just type it as a clean, and then we have to write rm, that is for remove. Then we have to give rf is basically remove, and check if that particular folder is there or not. If there is folder, then it's going to be delete. If that folder does not exist, then it won't take any action further. Okay, now we have to give the path name from where we have to delete. Okay, so it's build. Okay, and once it is built, then we have to run our application. So let's run as a command as a start, and then we have to use node build from build folder, and then we have to use our server.js file. Okay, and if we have to run our application from the TypeScript file, then we have to run for the dev, and then we can write as a nodemon. From nodemon we can start. Okay, and then src server.ts. Now if you want to run all these commands in a single line, then we have to use the npm run all. Okay, so what we can do here, we can just type as a build all, run all, and then we have to give all the command. Okay, so first of all we are going to run the clean. So here we have the clean, and then we have tsc, and then we have start. So once our code is ready and we are ready to build and run, so we have to just run npm run build all. Okay, this command is going to execute our clean, our then it's our compiling from TypeScript to JavaScript. Then it's going to start the application from the JavaScript file. Okay, now let's test it. So now let me close our other terminals where applications are running. Now open a new terminal. In order to open the terminal, we have to press the Ctrl J, that is the shortcut key we have. So here we have npm run all, right? That module is not installed yet. So let me install first npm run all module. Npm install npm run all. Okay, and that is required to at the development side. Okay, so we are going to give it here as a save dev. So npm run all is getting installed now. Now let's see our package.json file. So if you see here in the package.json file, if we see npm run all is installed as a dev dependency. Okay, now we are ready to run our application with the command. So now let's see the command here, the build all. Okay, so now let me open a bash command. Here we have to run npm run and then build all command. Okay, so this is the build all command, which is going to first clean this directory, and then it's going to be build tsc command and then start. Okay, and this is our start command, this is our tsc command, and this is clean. Okay, so all these three commands is going to be executed one by one. So npm run build all. Okay, now let's see. So if you see here, yep, the folder is being removed, build folder, and now our tsc command is getting executed. So if you see here, now server file is being generated, server.js, and finally it's going to run the application. Okay, build server.js. So our server is running on port 4001. So this is the way that we have to execute our application and build it. Okay, now let me create some important folders that we are going to use inside the src folder, source folder. So first we are going to use the config, and then we will be creating for the controller. So we are going to create a folder as a controllers, and then we are going to use the models where we are going to create for all our database models, and then we are going to use the routes, and we would be using views. We are going to use the EJS template. There are a lot of templates available, but in this specific application we are going to use EJS. So here I'm going to use as a views. If any other folder is required to configure further, I'll make it later on, but yeah, as of now we are good to go with these folders. Now most of the initial configuration has been completed for this application. Now further we will see how to connect Mongo database. Now let's create the configuration for the database. So go to the config folder, create a file here, config.ts. In this config.ts, we are going to create a variable as a username and password. Okay, so const mongo username equal to, we are going to take this value from our environment file process.env dot, we'll get the username. Okay, mongo username. In the same way, we are going to take the password as well. Okay, now let's create this username and password inside our .env file. Since already I have created a username in our MongoDB database. So now let me tell you how you can create a MongoDB user. So you can go to the mongodb.com and you can create your account here. In that account, once you'll go to the database, you can create the database over here. I have created a database, and if you are going to connect this database and MongoDB to Visual Studio Code, okay, so here you will get the username and whatever the password that you have created while creating your account, you have to put it over here. Okay, so this is the connection string that we have to provide in our application. So now let's create the Mongo URL in our config. Const mongo URL equal to, we have to provide the same URL. Okay, so the URL is, now let's go to the application. Now here we can pass the Mongo username. Okay, so this is my username. I'm going to replace it with $sign and Mongo username. Okay, and here we have the password. So let me replace with the password as well, Mongo password. Now our connection string is ready to use, but before that, here we are using the process.env, so we have to use our .env. We have to import module .env here as well. Okay, so let's import .env from .env. Okay, now we have to be config that .env, then after that we can get the value. Okay, so .env .config. Okay, so once we'll do the config, then after that we will be able to get all these values from our environment file. Now let me create the server port as well. Here we have given server port as a 4001. Now we have to use all these values, so we have to export these values. Okay, so now let me export this value. So we have to write export keyword, export, and this is the constant config. It's going to be returned as object. One property that we are going to give as a Mongo, and it should be having URL, and URL would be Mongo URL. Okay, now second property should be server, which will returning the port. So it's going to return the port, and port would be server port, right, that we have created here. Okay, now this object is ready to export from this file. Now we are going to use this configuration in our server.ts file. Okay, so we have to import this file. Here we are exporting, right, and then we have to import this file in our server.ts file. Okay, so how can we import that? So there are two ways to export. Okay, normally we can export like this. Okay, and we can export in another way, that is a default export. Okay, so how to do that default export? So we are going to remove this export from here, and then we have to be write the keyword export and just use the keyword as a default for default config. Okay, if we are doing in this way, default config. Okay, so in our server.ts file we have to just import config from config. Okay, if we are doing the default export, then we have to just write here config. Okay, but if you are not using the default export, then we have to wrap this into a curly bracket. Okay, now let's show that things as well. So here, if you are not doing the default export, right, so here we are using export keyword. So in this case, it's not going to read that. Okay, so see, it's giving the error has no default export. Okay, so if it's not a default export, then we have to wrap it into a curly bracket. Okay, so it's going to work in the same way. Now here we can just refactor our code. So this is going to be config dot server dot port. Okay, now let's create our database connectivity. Okay, with Mongo database. In order to connect with the Mongo database, we are required a library as a Mongoose. Okay, so let me install that. npm install, and this is required at the server side, right, because it is required at development side as well as server side, because connection would be needed at the server side as well. So we are going to use only Mongoose. Okay, we are not going to give the save dev option here. We're installing now. So Mongoose has been installed. If you want to see, you can see now I have two dependency here, Express and Mongoose. We are using the version 7.3.1. Okay, now let's go to the server.ts file and import our Mongoose. Import Mongoose from Mongoose. Okay, now let's connect with the database mongoose.connect. Okay, In order to connect, we have to provide the URL. Okay, so URL is config.mongo.url, right? That's what we have given. So now once Mongo is connected, now let's create a database connection. Const db equal to mongoose.connection, and then we have to use db on error. Okay, if any error comes while connection error, then we have to log the error. Okay, and if it's successfully connected, then db dot connected once open console.log database connected successfully. Okay, and once our database is connected successfully, then we have to create and start our server. Okay, because there is no meaning, okay, to just creating and executing our server before creating a successful database connection. So once database is successfully created, then after that we have to start our server. Okay, now we can write this in a separate function. So now let me create a separate variable, const start server equal to, we are going to pass as a fat arrow function, and in that fat arrow function we are going to call this our server code. Okay, now we will call this function over here. Okay, so now let's test it first. So we are going to execute npm run dev command in order to run. So if you see here, already we have created for the dev execution nodeman src server.ts. So we are going to execute the same command, npm run dev. Okay, now let's see if it is running successfully or not, and database is getting connected. So it's great. Now if you see, the database connected successfully, and then after that we are getting the message as a server is running on port 4001. So first we are creating a successful database connection, and then we are creating the server. Okay, now in the next section we will see how to use the TypeScript. Okay, as of now, if you are seeing here, all the codes that we are writing mainly in JavaScript only. We are not using the type over here. Okay, because this is having an express type. Okay, so in the next section I'll tell you that how we can use the power of TypeScript. Okay, but before that, let me commit this code to the GitHub so all of you can take this as a reference. So let me go to my profile here. I'm going to connect with my GitHub, and here in the repository I'm going to create a new repository here as library management. Okay, so this is available now. I'm going to make it as a public. I'm going to create a repository. So my repository has been created. So this is my repository link that we have to use. So, and this is the command that they have given the suggestion how we can add it. So I'm just going to open my terminal, use a new terminal over here. First of all, we have to do the initialization for our Git. So in the same folder, I'm going to use the Git init. So Git has been initialized now. If you see here, as of now, we have more than 4000 files, but we are not required to commit all those files. Okay, like build, node modules, and environment file. These files are not required to commit. So what we are going to do, we are going to create a file at the root level, gitignore.git ignore. Okay, in this file we are going to give all the folders or files which are not required to commit. Okay, so we will give here a build, and then we will give for our node modules, and then we will .env, right? Okay, so now if you see, as of now we are seeing only 8 files are there to commit. Now let's check git status. Git status basically give the list of all the files which are on track, are ready to commit. Okay, now let me add all those files for the commit. So git add, you can put the dot here. Okay, dot is going to consider all the files which are there to commit. Okay, if you want to give the manually, we can give all the file names manually here using the space. Okay, I'm going to add all the files here. So now if you see, all the files have been added here. Now let me show you git status once again. So if you see here, these all are the files have been added. Now git commit. Now let me open up git bash command prompt. So if you see here, as of now we are connected with the master branch. Now let's change the branch, git branch, new branch name. Okay, So I'm just going to give you the branch name as a v1. So now if you see, we are connected with the branch v1. Now let me commit all those codes. Okay, so git commit -m, and then we have to give the message. Okay, so here we can say as a application setup and database configuration. Application setup and database configuration. Okay, now let's commit it. So this have been committed. Now we have to push the code to the repository, but as of now we have not connected to the remote. So now let's connect to the remote first. So if you see here, we have given the command as a git remote add origin. Now use this command. So this is already added to the, if you see here, remote origin already exists, so already it's added. Now push the code, git push origin. So now it's pushing the code to our git repository. Now let's see. Now if you see here, code has been already pushed now in the version 1. Now in the next section we will see how to use the power of TypeScript and add types to our code. Now let's flip to the Visual Studio, go to the server.ts file. Here we are going to use the types from TypeScript. Okay, so Express itself provide a lot of types from the TypeScript. So here we can use Express itself. So this Express is going to be returned by from this Express. So we can put it as a type of Express here. And if you don't know what kind of this type would be, then you can just over it. You will get the detail over here. Okay. Now if you see here, we are having this connection is also returning the mongoose connection. So this would be the type of connection as well. So here we can put as a connection. Now further, let's see, this error would be the type of string. Okay, so we can just pass as a type string, and this function is not returning any value, so we can pass it as a return type as a void. And this function also not returning anything, we can also put it as a return type void. Okay, this function also not returning any type, so we can mark it as a void. So if you see the code that we have written in JavaScript, and on top of that we have added the types. Okay, here we have several types that is given from the Express. So that is request, response, and next function that is being used for the middleware. So as of now I'm not going to use it because we are going to use it in our route once we will discuss with our router. As of now we are using only Express here. Now let's try to build it and run this application. Now let's open the terminal. In order to open the terminal, we have to press Ctrl J, that is the shortcut key. Let's add up git bash terminal here. So in order to run in local, we have a command here, npm run dev. So let's start to run in the dev environment first. Npm run dev. So our nodemon is going to execute our server.ts file here. So nodemon is executing server.ts file. So starting now. So if you see here, database connected successfully and server is running on port 4001. Okay, now we have to build this entire ts file whatever we have to the build. Okay, and run the application. Now let's stop it. In order to stop, we have a command as a Control C as a shortcut key. Now run npm run build all. So now first of all it's going to clean the directory, build directory here, and then after that it's going to compile the code from TypeScript to JavaScript, and then after that it will execute. Okay, so if you see here, my build directory has been cleaned now. So now it's compiling, tsc command is getting executed. So if you see here, now build directory has been created. Now it is going to run the build server.js file. So great. So now if you are seeing, the database connected successfully as well as our server started running from our build folder. Okay. Now if you see here in the build folder, we have our server.js file as well as config.js file, which have been compiled from config.ts file and server.ts file. So whatever the TypeScript file we have here, it's being compiled into the JavaScript file. Now in the next section, we are going to create our route. Now let's create our first route. Go to the route folder, create a new file, indexroute.ts. Now let's close the other tabs here. Now let's first import Express. Import Express from Express. Okay. Now we'll create the router, const router equal to express.router. Okay, it is going to create the router, and that would be type of, so we'll add the type as well. Okay, and this router is going to be exported from express library. Okay, so now let's create our first route. That would be the get router dot get, and in this we'll just give our root path, and then we will give our callback function. So in this we will pass the request and response, and this request and response would be type of request and response, which is getting exposed from express module, request and response. Okay, now here we will send the response dot send. This is first get response. Okay, now we are required to export this export router, and we will export it default. Okay, now let's use this router to our server.ts file. So here, first of all, we have to import this file, our router file. Import index router from routes and then index route. Okay, and then after that we have to use this router in our middleware. Okay, so here we will add this as a middleware, app.use, and then just for the default route at the root level, and we will pass this index router. Okay, so now we have injected our route into the middleware. Now let's see, let's close this, let's run it locally, npm run dev. Okay, so node 1 is starting the server. So now our server is running, and now let's see if our route is working properly or not. Let's go to the Thunder client. In the Thunder client, so let's create a new request. Here we have to just pass our http localhost, and then we have to give our port number, that is 4001. Okay, and now let's send it. So if you see here in the response, we are getting status as a 200. Okay, and this is first get response. So our index route is working fine. Similarly, we will create the request for authors and book. Okay, so now let's create the route for author and book. Go to the route folder, create. Better to have a copy from here only. So let's rename it author route, and similarly we will have a route for the book route. Okay, now go to the author route. Mainly we are using here 4 type of request: get, post, put and delete. Okay, get when we require some data from the server, then we are using the get, and when we want to submit, when we want to save some data, then we are using the post, and in case if you want to update something from the database, then we are using the put, and if you want to delete something, then in that case we are using the delete request. Okay, so now let me just copy this and get, post, put and delete. Okay, put and delete. Okay, now here I'm going, in the put I'm going to pass the ID, and delete also that we require to pass the ID. This is my first author get response, author post response, author update response, author update response, and this is author delete response. Okay, and similarly we are using for the book as well. Okay, so I'm just going to copy all these routes and paste into the book. Okay, so now in place of author we will replace the book. Now let's go to our server.ts file. Here we'll add the routes for all our book and authors. Okay, so now let's copy this, and here we are going to add for author, and here we are going to add for the book. Okay, now this file is going to be come from author route, and this is coming from the book route. Okay, and we have to add these router to our middleware. So here we are going to add author router, and here we are going to add our book router. Okay, now let's test it. So if you see in the background, my node.js server is getting restarted whenever I'm going to do any changes in my file. Now it's running. Now let's test our, and before that here we will add for author default route as a author, and here we will add the default route as a book. Okay, now let's go back to our Thunder client. So in Thunder client, if you see, we are having this request. Now let's add here author. And if you see, this is the author get response. And if you are going to put the post, so this is author post response. So post is also working, and put we have to give some ID here. So this is author update response, and delete. And if you see here, this is author delete response. So all the routes are working as expected from the author route. Now let's test for the book. So we'll just pass as a book our get response. Get request for the book router is working. Post, this is post response, this is also working. Now use for the put we have to provide some ID. So here this is book update request response, that is also working. Now let's test for the delete. So it's working for the delete as well. So all the routes are working as expected from author route as well as book route. Okay. Now let's move to the author route. Now further, we are going to move all these logics to the controller, because it's not a good idea to have all those logics in the router, since once we are going to have a big project, then it would be very complex and it won't be easy to handle it. Okay, so now let's move all those logic to the controller. Now go to the controller folder and create a file, author controller.ts. Okay, now here we can create a class like author controller. Now let's create a static variable over here. So we'll give as a public static, and the variable would be the get author. Okay. And now here we'll put the logic from the author route. We are going to cut it and we'll paste inside the. Okay. So as of now, we don't have the response here. So let's import, or let's take it from here itself, Express. And now we will export this, export default as a author controller. Okay, close it for now. Okay, now go to our author route ts file. So here we can use author controller dot get author. Okay, so if you see here, it's automatically imported from author controller. Similarly, we'll do for post request as well. Okay, so post would be save author. Okay, so now go to the author controller, we'll create a same static variable, and here we will use for the save author. Okay, now this is post response, author post response. Okay, let's have for put and delete. Okay, now here we have update author, and here you would be having delete author. Okay, this is for update author and this is for delete author. Okay, now from here we can remove all these logics and directly we can use author controller dot save author. Okay, similarly here also we can use author controller dot update author. Okay, and here we can use author controller dot delete author, author controller dot delete author. Okay, now in the next section we will create the database in Mongo DB, and as well as we will create the models. Okay, so now let's create a database inside the Mongo DB. Here let's connect with the mongodb.com. Let's connect with my account. It's connecting to my cluster. So in this cluster, now let's go to the browse collection. So in this cluster, we have an option to create a database. So here we are going to create a database as a library management. Okay, and we will create the collection as author. Okay, now let's create it. Here we have additional preferences. So let's go ahead with the default option. So now if you see here, we have a collection here as an author. Now let's add another collection, that is books. Okay, let's delete it. We will create a author that we have to drop that collection. We would like to create a collection name as a authors. Okay, so here we will create a collection authors, go with the default preferences. Now if you see here, we have created a collections authors and books from the library management. Okay, and both are blank as of now. Now we need to connect this library management from our application. Okay, so now let's go back to our application. Here all the connections details that we have given in our config.ts file. So if you see here we have to pass our database name, library management. Okay. Now it's going to connect with our library management database. Okay. So let's see if it's getting connected with our newly created database or not. Yep, it's database connected successfully. Now let's create the model from the Mongoose. Okay. So go to the model folder. I'm going to create here author model, author.ts. Okay. Inside this, first of all, we have to import our Mongoose. So we'll write import Mongoose from Mongoose. Okay. Now I will create the interface because we are using the TypeScript. So we can take the advantage of TypeScript. So let's create an interface, export interface, and interface would be iAuthor. Okay. Interface always we have a prefix as a iAuthor. Okay. And that is going to have the property as a name, as a string. So we can pass it as a name, and that would be type of string. Okay. Now let's create another interface, export interface iAuthor model. Okay. That would be the interface of the author model. Okay. iAuthor model, and which is going to be extends from iAuthor, extends iAuthor as well as document. Okay. Document is exposed from the Mongoose. Now let's document we can expose from the Mongoose. Okay. Now further here we have to give the comma. Now let's create the schema, const author schema. That would be type of schema. Schema is also exposed from the Mongoose. So we can put it from here. So schema equal to new schema. Okay, we are going to create the object of schema here, and we'll pass all those properties. Okay, now here we have only one property as a name. Okay, so we'll create name, and that would be type of string. Here we have to give as a type, and that type would be string as well as it would be required. Okay, so we'll give as a required true. Here I have given the timestamp in order to maintain the created and updated date. Now we have to export this model. So we have to use the keyword export. Export default mongoose mongoose.model, and that model would be type of iAuthor model, author model, and then we have to give the model name. So here this is the model author, and then after that we have to pass the schema. Okay, so we have created a author schema over here. Okay, so let's pass the author schema here, author schema. So now we are ready with the author model. Now similarly we'll create a model for book as well. Okay, so now let's copy this file, paste it here. Now let's rename it as a book. Okay, go inside the book file. Here we have to replace all the author as a book, author as book, book model iAuthor iBook, and here this needs to be there as a book, and this needs to be book. Okay, in the book model we are going to have some more fields. The first one we are going to have as a title, as a string. Okay, then we would be having a description, that would be also a type of string, and then we would be having a published date. Book would be having the published date, right? And that would be type of date. And then we would be having a page count, which could be type of number. Okay, and we would be having cover image. Okay, we have to save the book cover as well. Okay, so we'll give the cover image, and that would be type of buffer. Okay, because we are going to store the image. And we would be having author, right? We have to provide the author details for this books belongs to which author. Okay, so we'll give author, and that would be type of mongoose, and it would be schema dot types dot object id. Okay, now we need to update our book schema. So here we are going to use the title, and then we are going to use description, and then we are going to use as a published date, and that would be type of date. And then we would be having a page count, that would be type of number, and then we would be having a cover image that would be type of buffer, and then finally we would be having a author, right? Author, that would be type of mongoose schema types object ID. So we'll copy this, required true, and we have to provide the reference. Okay, so reference would be author. Okay, now we are ready with the book model as well. Here I don't know what is this Mongo came from. Remove this. Everything looks good. So far we have done with the router, controller, model template creation. In the next section, we will see specifically for all the routes, and we will create our view template. Now let's commit our code. Let's open a Git bash terminal. Let's see how many files are there to commit. Git status. So we have here controller, models, and route folders. Okay, as well as we have config.ts and server.ts. Now git add dot. Okay, so it's going to add all of our files to commit. Now check again git status. Git status. So if you see here, all of these files are ready to commit. Now we are going to commit it. Git commit -m. -m is the message, and the message would be routes, controllers, and models templates created. Okay, but before that we are going to make it a new branch. Let's copy this. Let's create a new branch. Git branch -m, and then we will give the branch name as a v2. Okay, so now we are in the v2 branch. Now let's commit. All files are committed in the v2 branch now. Now git push origin. So it's asking to the commit into the head branch. Control V. Let's commit it. Git push origin to the head. So now it's all files are committed. Now let's see. Let's open the GitHub. In the library management, if you see, we have branch 2 v2, and if you open src folder, we will see all our config, router, model, all folders are pushed to the Git repository. Okay, now let's go back to the Visual Studio. Let's close all the files here. Close the terminals. Now let's go to the views folder here. Now let's create a folder as a layout inside view. This layout is going to have a layout which is going to be common for our entire project. So now let's create a layout file inside layouts folder. We are going to use EJS template here. EJS is basically embedded JavaScript. This is the commonly used in our Node.js applications. There are several type of templates available in the market, but yes, in this application we are going to use EJS. Now let's configure our layout. So first of all, we'll just press exclamation sign, which is going to create our HTML template. You have to just press the exclamation sign and then press tab. Automatically it's going to create this HTML template for us. Okay. Now in the body section, let's give a title as a library management. Now in the body section, we are going to give as a header, footer, and body. Okay, so let's give as a header section, and then we will give as a body section, and now we are going to use our footer. So these header, footer sections are available in HTML5. Okay, so these tags are available there. So now we are going to use the footer. Okay, now let me mention here, this is my header and this is my body and this is my footer. Control A, Control KF. So it's going to format your page. Control KF is going to be used to format. This is footer. Now let's configure our layouts. So go to the server.ts file here. So here we would be requiring our EJS module as well as Express EJS layout. So now let's install first. Control J. Let's create another terminal over here. npm install, and then we have to install EJS and we have to install Express EJS layouts. So we are going to use types here and then Express EJS layouts. Now let's install it. So both of the modules have been installed. Now let's see in the package.json file. So if you see here, Express EJS layout is installed and as well as EJS has been installed. Now let's go to our server.ts file. Here import Express EJS layout, Express EJS layouts from Express EJS layouts. Okay, now we have to be configure over here app.use as a middleware Express.js layout. Okay, app.use as a Express.js layout. Okay, as well as we have to set our view engines. Okay, so app.set and then we have to use the view engine and view engine as a EJS. So we have to inform to the node which view engine that we are using. Okay, so we are going to use our EJS, embedded JavaScript. Now we have to set our views as well as our layouts. Okay, so now let's set app.sets, and here we have to set our views. Okay, so we are going to set our views. Where exactly that we have to find our views? So we are going to use variable dir name. Dir name is going to return the directory from where your source code is available, and then we are going to add it with the views. Okay, because our all the views are going to be inside the views folder. Okay, so now we have to configure our layouts. Okay, so we are going to give our layouts app.sets, and we have to give our layout. Okay, and layout would be there inside the layouts folder. Okay, layouts inside layout. Now we had configure our view engines. Okay, we are passing the view engine as a EJS, embedded JavaScript, and then we have configure our views. So if you see here, views are there inside the source folder, so that we have to configure, and then we have to configure our layout, where exactly our layout is there. So the app.set layout, that layout is available inside the layouts folder. Okay, we would be having some of the static file as well, like our JavaScript file, our style sheets. Okay, so we are going to create a folder inside source directory as a public. Okay, inside public folder we are going to have style sheets script. So let me create some folders over here for style sheets, and let me create a one more folder inside this as a script. Okay, so here we will put our all the style sheets and JavaScript files here, which is going to be used throughout the application. Now let's configure this. So here we are using app.set, and we have to give as a express.static, and we have to define what all the files that we are going to give as a static here. Okay, so here we have to define as a public src public, right? Here we have to use. Okay, because this is going to be used as a middleware. So now, and we remember that these all the configuration needs to be before our configuring routes needs to be configured at the end of the middleware. Now let's use one more thing, app.use as a express.json. Okay, that is being available inside the express, so we are not needed body parser anymore. Okay, so we are going to use as a express JSON. So now we have done with the configuration with the layouts. Now let's go inside the views folder, and let's create a file as a index.ejs, and let's give here as a body. And now go to the layout.ejs file. Here we have header, body, and footer, right? So whatever the code will be there written in the inside the EJX, that is going to be come inside this section. Okay, and this header and footer will be common for throughout the application. So let's see how we can write our body section. So we have syntax, and we have to use this percentage sign hyphen. Okay, and here we have to just write type body. Okay, so this body automatically it's going to take the index.ejs file. Okay, now we have to configure our header and footer as well. Now first let's try to run this if it is working or not. So before that we have to go in our controller, and if you see in our index controller, here we are having a response.send, right? So in this our index controller we are going to use response.render, and in this response.render we have to provide our index file, right? So we are going to give our index.ejs. This index.ejs is going to be render over here. Okay, and let's remove this response.send, and so now let's try to run this if it's working or not. So we are going to use as npm run dev command, npm run dev. Now it's running. So it has given an error as express EJS layout module not found. Okay, so here we have installed its type, so we have to install this module as well. So let me install this module, express EJS layout. Now let me run it once again, npm run dev command. Now our server is running at the port 4001. Now let's go to the browser. Here localhost as a 4001, right? So let's go to the use as a 4001. Here we are getting as a error, failed to look up view index in view directory. Okay, so let's see what is the issue here. We have index.ejs here. So let's go in our server.ts file. So see here, in the views are not found. Okay, so here after directory name we have to give the / for the views. Okay, now let's see if it's working or not. Yep, so it's working now. If you see here, we are getting header, body and footer, okay, from the layouts, and this body is coming from the index.ejs file. Now let's change something here in the index.ejs file, body from index.ejs file. Okay, now let's save it and refresh this page. So if you see here, body from index.ejs file. So whenever we do any changes in our index file is going to be reflected over here. Okay, and all the routes from user, from the author, from the book is going to be rendered over here inside this body section, and header and footer will be common for all. Okay, now let's create a header. So header is going to be common for all our applications. Okay, so whatever the controls or components are there common for entire application, we have to give inside the partials. So let me create another folder inside the views as a partials, and inside the partial let me create a file as a header.ejs. Okay, inside the partial folder, header.ejs. Now let's mention as a header from header.ejs. Okay, now we have to load this header file dynamically in our layout. Okay, so let's see how to do that. So here in place of header, we are going to use a syntax as include, and then we are going to include our path. This is our layout.ejs, and our header file is available inside the partials. Okay, so we have to move one directory up, // and then we have to give partials, and then we have to give our header.ejs. Okay, that's the file that we are going to use. Okay, and now let's enclosed with a colon. Now this file is header from EJS, and we are going to use inside the layout file. Okay, now let's see if it is working or not. Go to the browser, refresh this page. So if you see here, we are getting as a header from header EJS. Okay, so it's working absolutely fine. Now let's design our header. So let's flip to the Visual Studio. Here inside the style sheets, we are going to create a file as a style.css. We are going to use the cascade style sheet, style.css, and then we are going to create a folder as a shared. Inside the shared folder, we are going to create a header.css file, and this header.css file is going to be imported inside the style.css. Okay, so let's import that. Import, and then we have to provide the path. Okay, and path would be style sheets, and then we have shared, and then we have header.ejs. Okay, and we have to add this style.css file inside our layout.ejs. Okay, so now let's go back to our layout.ejs file, and here we have to add our style. Okay, so now let's add here link, and we have to give the rel as a style sheet, and we have to give as a reference for the href for our folder as a style sheets, and then style.css. Okay, style sheets, and then style.css. So I have created already style sheet for header.css, so I'm not going to spend time to create the css. So I'm just going to paste it here. You can take the reference from the GitHub for this css file, and now let's give some css to our style.css. So here I have given root as a font family, and then I have given a before after box sizing as a border box, and then I have given body as a padding margin 0 and display as a flex, and flex direction as a column, and width as a 100%. Okay, as well as we have created a section. So let me create a style for the section as well. So here in the section, we have given as a width as a 100%, display as a flex, and justify content as a center, align item as a center, and margin top from 100 pixel. Okay, now let's see how it looks like. So go to the browser, refresh it. So if you see here, we are seeing the header from header.ejs, body from index.ejs, and footer. Okay, now we are going to add some links to our header file. So let's flip to the Visual Studio. Here if you see header.ejs, here I'm going to use template. I'm just doing here copy paste to save our time. So I have added some navigation over here, and then I have added a logo for the library management, and this is the line that I have added, which is required for our responsive design. So let's see how it looks like. Let me refresh it. So if you see here, now we are seeing a nice header as a library management. Now let's add some link over here. So in our Visual Studio, let's add a UL li. Okay, and inside li we are going to add anchor tag, and we are going to give as a href, and by default we are giving as a root path as a home, and let's give a class as a links, which I've already defined in the header.css file. And now let's create some more routes here. One that I'm going to create for author, then I'm going to create for the books, authors, and here I'm going to book. Let's create a path for the contact, and then we would be having a register that is going to be used for the user registration, and we would be having sign in, or let's have a login. Okay, now let's see, just refresh it. So if you see here, now we are able to see a very nice header over here with link as a home, author, books, contact, register, and login. These links are not going to work because we have not configured it, and this header is totally responsive. So if you see here, so here we are seeing this as a home, author, book, contact, login, register. Okay. Now in the next section, we are going to create a user route, and inside the user route, we are going to implement our login and registration functionality for the user, as well as we will do the authentication by using the JWT tokens. Okay. Now let's commit the code, whatever we have done so far. So let's go back to our git bash command here. Let's see what all the files are required to be commit. Git status. So if you see here, we have a package log.json file, package.json file, index controller, server.ts, and public and view that we have created newly. Okay. So now let's git add all these things is going to be inside the v2 branch. So now let's create another branch, git branch -m, and then v3. Okay. Now it's going to create a new branch. Now we are in the new branch. Now let's commit all this code in our new branch. Git commit -m, created views, layouts, header, and style sheets. Okay, configuration. Git commit. So all of these files have been committed in v3 branch, and now let's push it. Git push origin head. Okay. Oops, I need to use git push origin head. Okay. So all the code have been moved to the branch v3. Now let's see it. Go to our Git repository. Here, if you see the library management, inside we have our v3 branch, and inside our v3 branch we have our views, layout. All those folders are available there. Okay.